I'm Jen Taylor Skinner, and this is the Electorette. This is a special episode of the Electorette. So last week, you may recall that Michael Cohen testified in a hearing before the House Oversight Committee. And of course, there were fireworks during that testimony. During Michael Cohen's testimony, he referred to Trump as a racist, a con man, and a cheat. And adding to those fireworks were the newly elected members of the House. Their questioning of Michael Cohen got a lot of attention from news outlets. But the entire hearing was surreal. This was the biggest political news of that week. And I had so many thoughts about what transpired during that hearing, and I just needed to get some of those thoughts off of my chest. So that's where today's guest for this special episode comes in. Marisa Kabas is a writer and an activist, and during the 2016 election cycle, she built this amazing online tool called Crush the Midterms. You may have heard about it. So Crush the Midterms was a tool that you could input your personal data, and it would give you a list of steps that you could take to help Democrats win back the House and the Senate during the midterms. It was really popular. There were celebrities using it. I used it. Even Hillary Clinton was a fan of this tool. I've admired the work of Marisa Kabas since then. So we got together and we recorded this special episode. So here is my conversation with Marisa Kabas. So last week, the big news was Michael Cohen testified, and Michael Cohen is or was Trump's attorney, right? He testified before the House Oversight Committee, right? And so that was the big news last week. And the big news was, the fireworks between the Democrats and the freshman Democrats and Republicans in between them and Michael Cohen. But of course, given this news cycle, lots of things have happened since the testimony ended. And the first thing I saw was that, and I don't know if you've seen this yet. So Trump, he was in Vietnam, and he was trying to make a deal with North Korea, and that failed, right?
Yep.
So he came back. It's the second time he failed on that. He came back and he blamed the Cohen testimony on the failure of that. I don't know if you've read that yet.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense, right?
Right, exactly. He said, for the Democrats to interview in open hearings, I'm reading his tweet, a convicted liar and fraudster, which is so ironic for him to say that. At the same time,
he's projecting.
Right. At the same time as I was having this nuclear summit with North Korea, right? So, I guess my first question is, if that were the case, then why did the summit fail? Why did it fail the first time he met with North Korea?
Yeah, right. Yeah, like what was happening that day? Like, I'd love to hear he should go back in his calendar and see like, oh, well, that thing was happening that day. So, that's why that didn't work out. It's convenient.
Exactly. So how did you feel generally about the Cohen testimony?
So I went into it. It's so funny. Like these days, I plan my schedule around congressional hearings. Like a few years ago, if you told me that, I would have been like, what? And it's like, I don't have patience to sit and watch a movie, but I can sit for 7 hours watching a congressional hearing on C-SPAN. Times have really changed. I was kind of excited. I don't know if that's bad to say, excited going into it just because I was like, what are we about to hear? What's about to happen? And it also brought me back to a few months ago when Christine Blasey Ford testified during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, and it just felt really monumental. It felt like history unfolding. And then as it started and Cohen was reading his prepared remarks, that feeling of like, how this is so surreal. Like, how is this where we're at right now? And I know that sounds kind of naive, and we've had more than 2 years in this administration already, but there are just some of those days where I need to pinch myself and be like, is this really happening right now? Is this a person who was close to the president of the United States? And it just like, it's sort of like an out-of-body experience. I don't know if you felt that at all.
Yes, no, you're right. I think that I've heard that a few times from other people. And I mean, I think it's a good place that we're there. We're in that place and we're not completely desensitized to the abnormality of what's happening, right, with this administration. And so I think that's good.
Yes.
From the Cohen testimony, there are going to be other investigations, which we can talk about later. But imagine if that entire day we were, debating about climate change or debating about, the fact that the U.S. has this, astronomically high maternal mortality rate. But you make a really excellent point. Overall, I mean, so I think that as Democrats, we're excited because we see the hearings as possibly coming to a close of this administration. That's how we view the hearings. And that's what is exciting about it. We aren't necessarily excited about the fact that we have to have these hearings. We could be talking about other things. What's happening with immigration and the fact that we have this huge backlog of, asylum applications and, so many other important things.
Yeah, I mean, today alone, Jerry Nadler announced that they're looking to get all these documents and information from a lot more people in Trump's orbit. Seems like it was an outgrowth of the Cohen hearings. And it's good because it feels like there's finally some progress being made. And this is why we worked to crush the midterms so that we could have control of the House and of the committees. But at the same time, it's not lost on me that the more information we uncover, the more hearings we're going to have. If impeachment does end up being on the table, the impeachment hearings are going to go on and on and on. And it's like the agony is prolonged. And we very well may have to sit through another Trump campaign season next year if he's not removed before the 2020 campaign really kicks off in earnest.
Yeah, I'm getting angrier just thinking about that possibility. That brings me to the next point. You mentioned that there are going to be more hearings. It was just breaking news today that the House Judiciary Committee has requested more documents from a long list of people. I don't know how many people are on this list, like possibly 100 or close to 100. And I think that was a direct result of the Cohen hearings, right? And some of the things that were uncovered there. Trump Jr. is on that list. Jeff Sessions is on the list. Julian Assange, Roger Stone, Sean Spicer, and the NRA. The NRA is on this list.
Well, good. I mean, they've sort of skated by and haven't really had to be directly accountable for all the havoc that they've wreaked as an organization. That list is just a who's who of all the people who we've known all along have been perpetrating terrible things and are sort of just, continue to help rule our government in some capacity. And then it's like, wait, they all need to be held to account for the things that they've been doing. And like, maybe that's finally going to happen. But again, it's really hard to get your hopes up when the progress here has been so slow.
Right. So what did you think about the performance of both the Republicans and Democrats during the Cohen testimony?
I thought the Republicans behaved in a way that it blew my mind, because I couldn't believe how they were just gaslighting everybody and claiming that the president is a good man. One of them said that he's in Asia right now protecting our country, and Michael Cohen is a liar, but no one else in the orbit is a liar, right? Like they're doing a really respectable job, and they're standing up for American values. And I couldn't believe just how aggressive they were in defending the president and the administration. And I was like, you doth protest too much. It didn't ring true at all. It felt like they had something to hide, that they were on defense, that they wanted to protect Trump and the interests that he is protecting at all costs. He employs people like Michael Cohen. All they care about is keeping their taxes low and answering to their religious base, denying women reproductive freedom, all the things that Democrats are not. And Democrats made it clear that they were prepared, that they were ready to expose Cohen for who he is, and also expose Trump as a result. And they asked some really, really smart questions. I mean, I was so blown away. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez gets a lot of crap, and she's under a microscope, and she took that opportunity to ask really thoughtful, probing questions and was instrumental in probably moving this whole thing forward.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
Right. That's been the feedback about, or that's been the take on her questions. And, I don't know how I feel about that. So, and what I mean by that is that I don't know if I'm offended by the idea that people are surprised that a young woman could be so prepared. I feel like that should be offensive to me.
I think it's actually, I hear what you're saying, and I do agree with that to the degree, because that seems to be the thing, like, oh, I can't believe how well she did. It's like, well, she's a congresswoman. She should be able to perform well. But it was striking the difference between even some of the younger, new Democrats versus the older ones. And it just seems like the level of preparedness and what they came there to do were very different. I mean, the older Democrats are used to getting briefed on the situation, and they're obviously very familiar with it, but they wanted their moment of sort of grandstanding about just the state of things and how disappointed they are. Like, they wanted maybe their viral moment. And the freshman members of Congress, they already have so much attention, so they don't need to have some great big rhetorical moment. They just wanted to actually show that they can do the work, which I think is, again, on Ocasio-Cortez, it was like, is she all bluster? Is she all talk? Is she just going to do Instagram lives? And now she's here being like, no, I'm actually here to do this job specifically.
Yeah, but, comparing the Democrats and Republicans, I mean, one of the things that I noticed is that, so Republicans didn't actually come to the hearing to help anything, right? They came to obstruct. I mean, that was clear. Mm-hmm. But they were very consistent and cohesive at their line of questioning. And their line of questioning was around the fact that Cohen was a liar and he shouldn't be trusted. It seemed like they got together on that, and they agreed that that was going to be the message that they would push, right? Which, again, is very ironic considering the person that they're protecting, right. Trump. I thought that they were more cohesive than the Democrats, and then this other line of questioning that they more than one Republican stayed on, which was that Michael Cohen was in this for a book deal and a movie deal.
Yeah, that was so strange to me. Whenever they said it, it was sort of like took you out of the experience. It just so far from what's relevant in this very important moment. And to your point about them staying cohesive on the message, Republicans are really good at that. They have party lines, and they're okay not straying from them if it means that they're going to get certain things in the end. Like, they're willing to compromise their moral stance on things if it leads to X, Y, Z that benefits them. Whereas we as Democrats aren't willing to do that. And sometimes it's to our detriment, but at the same time, we're never going to have the sort of groupthink that the GOP has, because we encourage independent thought. And I think that's what makes us stronger as a party and attracts a more diverse group of people.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think that there are moments where we could use it, like in these hearings. Like, I was hoping that more members would approach them with the aim of getting Cohen to admit things that could lead to, articles of impeachment, or could, uncover some things that we haven't been able to uncover. And I was hoping that they would all kind of get together and go in that direction. But, that didn't necessarily happen. Everyone they had their own direction.
Yeah, it didn't seem like they coordinated much. Yeah, I think you're right that we could have uncovered more that could have helped move things forward. But at the same time, based on all the documents that were requested today, it seems like they have plenty to go on after the hearing.
So one of the other freshman members, Rashida Tlaib, caused some fireworks because she called out, she called to attention the fact that the Republicans brought out, so if you weren't watching the hearings, Lynn Patton. So Lynn Patton she's a part of the Housing and Urban Development, and she works for Ben Carson. So she's, part of the Trump administration, and she's an African-American. She's a Black woman. And one of the Republicans, Mark Meadows, brought her to the hearings and had her stand up as evidence that Trump was not actually racist, which is offensive on so many levels, right?
And didn't let her say anything.
I mean, she was literally objectified and tokenized, just, literally and symbolically, she just stood there and didn't say anything. But Rashida Tlaib, the freshman congresswoman, she actually said something during the hearing. She actually called them out as this act as being racist, right?
Right. And people and Mark Meadows took that as, you're calling me racist. And it's like, well, Mark, step back for a second, listen to what she said. She didn't say you're racist. She said the act itself was racist, it's a very important distinction to make.
Sure.
I mean, the Republicans don't see that. And obviously Democrats say, okay, yeah, Mark Meadows is clearly racist. But I watched this interesting video the other day. It was from like 10 years ago. I don't know if you're familiar with Jay Smooth, but he was explaining like the best way to win an argument with someone in that situation is don't call the person racist, because you are supposing to understand what's in their mind and knowing who they are. And it's really easy for them to retort with, I'm not racist, you don't know me. But if you are attacking the actual act and the specific thing in question, it's easier to pick that apart and make other people understand that the inherent racism in it.
Yeah, I get that. And, I employ that tactic myself personally, right? Sometimes, but it just depends on the situation, right?
Sure.
I mean, we've gotten to this point with the GOP where, they're supporting people like Steve King. And, at some point we just have to just call them out and be very direct, right?
Right. And she was, I mean, that was the most direct that most people have been, even though she wasn't calling him racist. It was very shocking. Like, you felt the air kind of go out of the room. And some of the maybe older Democrats who are more concerned about respectability and politeness sort of looking at her like, oh God, where is this going? But I don't know. I thought it was so brave. I thought it was brave because these older white male Republicans are not used to answering for anything. Very rarely called out in the moment. They're very rarely in the same room as people who disagree with them. And that kind of goes back to the whole groupthink thing, like, oh, you say something racist and the room just nods along and smiles. And she, particularly as a new member of Congress and a woman of color, she took this opportunity when all eyes were on this hearing to kind of turn it back on him when he and Representative Jim Jordan had been literally screaming the whole time. Yeah. And she shifted the power dynamic in I thought, a really remarkable way.
And I have to say something, because we've talked about this a few times, and I see this a lot online, that people make this division with Democrats between the older members and the newer members, and it being kind of a generational thing. But I don't necessarily see that. I think it's a personality thing. So, for instance, Maxine Waters would have no problem saying that he's a racist, and right. neither would Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris actually did just call Trump a racist in an interview, and so did Rashida Tlaib. And so the fact that Cummings wouldn't necessarily do that, I don't think that that's a function of his age. I think it's just a function of his personality.
Sure, I think that's right. I think there's also something to be said about the setting. Saying someone's racist in a congressional hearing versus in an interview with a media publication, it just seems like different situations. I don't know if Maxine Waters or Kamala Harris has said Trump's a racist in a congressional setting, but it just feels like a very pointed and an intentional time to do that, to sort of like get even more of a rise out of them.
No, you're right. That's a good point, right? So a congressional hearing should have more formality to it, I guess, right? And
right. And I think it's actually against the House rules to say anything derogatory about a fellow member in the confines of a hearing.
Oh, I didn't actually realize that. That's good to know. So what are we saying here? Was she right, or was she? No, so we know that she's right?
Well, I think she got off on a technicality because she didn't call him racist.
Oh, right.
So, and I can't speak for her. I don't know if she actually knew that, but part of me thinks she did, because she was reading it. It seemed like it was a pretty carefully worded statement.
Yeah, or maybe she knew what she wanted to say, but she didn't know that it was against the rules, or maybe she'd forgotten because she just had her orientation 8 weeks ago.
Maybe, but she seemed to know that like she could say that thing was racist, but she was like, no, I did not call you racist. I think he wanted like a rule check, and they were like, no, that's not against the rules. She can say that.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we're going to have a summer of investigations, a summer of hearings, right? The summer of 2019.
Yeah, it's going to be like that summer when I was in middle school and I was obsessed with the Real World Hawaii. And I just stayed inside watching every episode. And it was like, you should be outside, but it's going to be like that, but much more sad.
Exactly. Very, very sad. Yeah. Anyway, is there anything coming up for Crush the Midterms that we should be aware of?
We are kind of working on what's coming next. So I don't have anything major to share at the moment, but just keep looking out for the next phase because 2018 was so great and we definitely crushed that. So we are looking to crush 2020.
Excellent. Well, Marisa Kabas, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's been so much fun.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast. And until next time, keep up the good fight.